All right, let's dive right in. Here's a question I bet you've thought about. How much can your brain actually hold? Like, is there some massive unused potential rattling around in there?
Yeah, it's a fascinating question. And for ages, the number of people throw around was, what, 100 terabytes?
Exactly, 100 terabytes.
Yeah.
Sounds like a ton, right? Enough for, I don't know, thousands of movies.
It really does. But what's really exciting and kind of blows that out of the water is the newer research. It suggests that number is, well, way off.
Way off. And it points to parts of the brain we kind of thought were just, background support.
Precisely.
Yeah.
Not the main players we always focused on.
Which is why we're doing this deep dive. We looked at two really key sources. There's a study from the Salk Institute back in 2016 digging into synapse size.
The connections between neurons.
And then super recently, May 2025, an MIT article flooding this whole new idea about these star-shaped cells, astrocytes.
All right, so our plan here is to pull out the biggest insights from both of these. We want to understand this, frankly, mind-boggling potential storage and, what it might actually mean.
For us, for AI, maybe even for treating some really tough diseases, it's kind of looking at the brain's memory architecture in a whole new light.
It really is a fundamental shift.
Okay, so let's start with the numbers. Because that Salk study, it really changes the game. Forget 100 terabytes. They suggested our brains might store at least a petabyte.
A petabyte minimum.
Yeah.
And just so you get the scale, a petabyte is 1,000 terabytes?
1,000 or 1,000,000 gigabytes. It's not a small increase.
Not at all. It's a 10-fold jump from what we thought.
The source had this great analogy. If you had a petabyte of music, just regular 4-minute songs, it would take you 2,000 years of nonstop playing to listen to it all.
2,000 years.
Ooh.
That really puts it in perspective, doesn't it? Inside your head. Potentially.
Crazy potential. Now, petabyte is a computer term, obviously.
Sure, but neuroscientists find it useful. It's a benchmark, a way to compare, to try and grasp the sheer scale of what the brain might be capable of storing.
And traditionally, storage meant neurons, right? Those 86 billion nerve cells.
Yeah, 86 billion, not the old 100 billion number. And crucially, the connections between them, the synapses.
Trillions of them. That's where memory was supposed to live, and how those neurons talk across the synapses.
Right, the strength and pattern of those connections.
Yep.
That was the standard model.
So how did that Salk study get from looking at synapses to landing on a petabyte? What did they actually find?
They looked really closely at how signals jump that tiny gap, the synapse between neurons. Remember, memories become electrical pulses. They travel down a neuron.
And then they have to cross that gap using chemical messengers, neurotransmitters.
Exactly. A tiny gap, 20 to 40 nanometers. The Salk team built this incredibly detailed 3D digital model of a bit of a rat's hippocampus.
The memory center.
Right, to see how synapse structure affects things. And they found something unexpected.
Okay, what was it?
In about 10% of the connections they looked at, one neuron wasn't just making one connection to its neighbor. It was making two. Two synapses to the exact same neuron.
Wait, sending the same message twice to the same destination. Why?
Good question. But here's the kicker. These twin synapses weren't identical. They varied slightly in size.
How slightly?
On average, about an 8% difference in size between the pair.
8%? That sounds tiny. Why does that matter?
Because size correlates with strength. A bigger synapse generally means a more reliable signal. But that consistent small difference, it let them calculate something huge.
Which was?
That synapses don't just come in a few sizes like weak or strong. Their models suggested synapses exist in 26 distinct, discrete sizes.
26? That's way more granular than anyone thought, right? Like almost 10 times the variability.
Exactly. And that's the key to the capacity jump. More possible sizes means each synapse can store more information. Instead of just 1 or 2 bits, like maybe on-off or small-large.
Yeah.
Their calculation was about 4.7 bits of information per synapse.
Okay, 4.7 bits. Still sounds small individually.
It does. But then you multiply that by the trillions of synapses in the brain.
So that small increase per synapse scales up massively across the whole network.
Precisely. That's how they reached the 1 petabyte estimate. More potential states for each connection equals vastly more storage overall.
Mind blown, just from connection size. But okay, crucial point. This was a rat hippocampus model. Does it apply to us?
The researchers seem pretty confident it does. The basic structure is very similar. In fact, some think the human capacity might be even higher.
Higher than a petabyte?
maybe 2 or 3 petabytes, some
Yeah.
speculate. So yeah, even that huge number might be conservative for humans.
Unbelievable. Just based on how neurons connect.
Yeah.
But that's not the whole story now, is it? Let's shift gears to that recent MIT work from this year, May 2025.
Right, because this introduces a whole different type of cell into the memory equation, the astrocytes.
The star-shaped ones, billions of them, weren't they just considered like the brain's janitors and support crew?
Pretty much. Cleanup, nutrients, blood flow regulation. Important, sure, but not involved in the actual thinking or remembering, or so we thought.
The backstage crew, essentially.
Kind of, yeah. But this new MIT hypothesis, it puts them center stage. It suggests astrocytes might be critical for memory storage, helping explain that massive capacity.
Okay, how does the support cell get involved in memory? The article mentioned the tripartite synapse.
Yeah, that's key. We used to think of a synapse as just the 2 neurons connecting. Now the picture includes the astrocyte. Thin little arms, or processes, from the astrocyte actually wrap around that neuronal junction.
So it's not just 2 neurons talking, the astrocyte is physically there, listening in, or more.
Listening and participating. The source used a great analogy. Think of an octopus with millions of tiny tentacles. The astrocyte is the body. The processes are the tentacles reaching out, wrapping around potentially thousands of synapses.
Wow, an octopus hugging all these conversations. And there's evidence this matters, right?
Yeah.
Messing with astrocyte communication actually harms memory.
Yes, studies have shown that. Disrupting the astrocyte-neuron link impairs memory function. They're definitely influencing the conversation.
But they don't use electricity like neurons, do they?
No, their language is different. It's based on calcium. Changes in calcium levels inside the astrocyte. They sense neural activity, their calcium levels change, and then they release their own signaling molecules, called gliotransmitters, back into the synapse.
So neurons talk, astrocyte listens and changes its calcium, then the astrocyte talks back with these gliotransmitters, influencing the neurons.
Exactly, a sort of feedback loop. A closed circle, as the source put it. Neuron activity, astrocyte calcium, astrocyte gliotransmitters, influencing neuron activity.
Okay, but what are they doing in that loop computationally? That's been the big question.
Right, how does this slower calcium-based system contribute to memory? And that's where the MIT team's modeling comes in. They used a machine learning concept,
What was it called?
dense associative memory. The problem with older brain models, like Hopfield networks, is they struggle to store enough insight if they only link neurons in pairs. Like A connects to B.
Okay.
Dense associative memory theory says you can store vastly more if you can link more than 2 units together simultaneously. Think A, B, C, D all interacting.
Multi-way connections, not just pairs. But how does the brain do that? Neurons usually connect one-to-one or one-to-many, but linking groups like that seems hard.
This is the leap the MIT hypothesis makes. Remember the astrocyte octopus with its tentacles?
Wrapping around thousands of synapses.
Exactly. That astrocyte process, touching all those different synapses, provides the physical structure to potentially mediate connections between them. It acts like a bridge or a hub.
Ah. So the astrocyte isn't just listening to one synapse, it's connected to many, and it could link the information flow between those synapses, making the multi-way connection possible.
That's the core idea. The astrocyte process could be the physical basis for implementing something like dense associative memory in the brain.
And when they built a model incorporating this neuron-astrocyte interaction,
Their model could store significantly more information than the neuron-only models. It provides a plausible biological mechanism for achieving that huge storage capacity, potentially the petabyte range or more.
so how are memories actually stored in this astrocyte neuron system, according to the model?
The idea is memories aren't just in the neuron connection strength. They might also be encoded in gradual changes in the calcium patterns inside the astrocyte processes.
So the astrocyte's internal state holds part of the memory.
Potentially, yes. And then it signals this state back to the neurons it's connected to via those gliotransmitters, maybe reinforcing or helping recall the memory pattern. It's a distributed memory across neurons and astrocytes.
That's really different.
Yeah.
And the source mentioned it's efficient, too, focusing on the astrocyte processes, not the whole cell.
Right. Treating each little tentacle as a computational unit gives you high capacity and fits with the brain's known energy efficiency. Dense associative memory itself is quite efficient in that regard.
What did other experts think? The article quoted someone, Maurizio De Pita.
Yeah, De Pita seemed quite positive. He called it a biologically grounded explanation. He pointed out that, theoretically, each tripartite unit The two neurons and the bit of astrocyte connecting them could store a huge number of patterns.
How huge?
He said potentially as many patterns as there are neurons in the whole network, implying an arbitrarily large number, limited only by brain size.
Arbitrarily large.
Wow.
Okay, so summing up these findings, synapse size, variability, boosting capacity, and now astrocytes potentially enabling even vaster storage through multi-way connections. What are the big implications here? Where could this lead?
Well, huge implications for AI, for starters. This offers a completely different blueprint for building artificial memory systems.
Oh, so
Instead of just pairing things up, AI could be built using this dense, multi-coupled architecture inspired by the astrocyte model. Imagine AI that can store massive amounts of data, but recall it super efficiently, using very little power, like our brains.
that sounds like a game changer. The source mentioned things like better voice recognition, robotics, AI assistance.
Autonomous systems, brain-machine interfaces, neuroprosthetics. Yeah, a whole range of advanced AI applications could benefit from brain-like dense memory.
And it's kind of cool that brain science might start driving AI design more directly, not just the other way around.
It is a potential shift, yeah, where neuroscience informs AI architecture in a fundamental way.
What about the medical side? You mentioned diseases earlier.
Right. Neurodegenerative diseases like Alzheimer's. We already know astrocytes are involved. Somehow they change in disease states. This model gives a computational reason why that might matter for memory loss.
It suggests the memory storage mechanism itself involving these tripartite synapses and astrocyte signals might be breaking down.
That's the hypothesis. It provides a new framework to understand what's going wrong at that fundamental level. Not just cell death, but maybe a breakdown in the astrocyte's computational role in memory.
Which could lead to new treatments.
That's the hope. If we understand how astrocytes contribute to healthy memory, maybe we can find ways to target them therapeutically. Could we manipulate their signaling or connections to restore function? It opens up new possibilities.
That sounds incredibly promising. But the source added caveats, right? It's still early days for therapies.
Oh, absolutely. Huge caveats. This is fundamental research, a compelling model, but translating it to actual treatments requires a lot more work. Years, likely decades.
And there are still unknowns, limitations the researchers acknowledge. DePita mentioned some.
Yeah, he pointed out that models are always simplifications. We still can't fully capture the insane complexity of the living brain in real time, with everything happening at once across billions of cells.
We can model the idea, but seeing it perfectly in action is another story.
Exactly. And critically, both the MIT team and DePita stress that while the model fits the biological data we don't have direct experimental proof yet.
No smoking gun showing this specific calcium signaling in astrocytes definitely creates, stores, and recalls a specific memory in, say, a human.
Not yet. That's the next big challenge for experimental neuroscientists. Design studies to directly test if this astrocyte-mediated memory hypothesis holds true in living systems.
So it's a powerful, biologically plausible idea with massive implications, but still needs that definitive experimental confirmation.
Precisely. But having this computational model gives researchers very specific things to look for, which should accelerate discovery.
Okay, so wrapping this deep dive up, we started at maybe 100 terabytes of brain storage.
And now research points towards at least a petabyte, possibly much more, driven first by the surprising precision in synapse sizes.
And now, potentially, by the crucial role of these star-shaped astrocytes, the supposed support cells, acting as hubs for dense memory storage.
It's a radical shift in understanding our own hardware.
With huge potential impacts from smarter, more efficient AI.
To maybe, someday, finding new ways to fight devastating memory loss in diseases like Alzheimer's.
It really makes you stop and think, though, doesn't it? If these support cells hold the keys to such vastly greater memory capacity than we ever imagined, what else is going on up there? What other secrets about our potential, our capabilities, or maybe even mechanisms of control are hidden in that complex wiring, just waiting to be uncovered, or perhaps waiting to be exploited?
That is the unsettling but also incredibly exciting question, isn't it? What else don't we know about what's happening inside our own heads?